Hey there, Joe Gilder here. Welcome back to episode 13 of Mixed Together. In the last episode, we did some automation funness with the purple haze here, which somebody in the comments commented that these are the hay tracks and they're purple. I didn't do that on purpose, so that's a nice catch. Here's what we did.
Old thing, always wondering, hey, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Gotta know.
And then that is continuing to go. If you missed that video, you can check it out. But that feedback is happening right now, and it's about to be kind of faded back in.
Always looking over my shoulder, always looking up at that.
So there you go. There is my one, the only fun thing I will ever do in this mix. I'm kidding. Today I want to focus on guitars. I'm feeling, as I just quickly listened a little bit before starting the video, I'm feeling like things are getting pretty close to being in that final stage category where we can kind of mark it down as done, because we've done quite a bit. And I'm not one to love to overmix, so I'm really just listening again for things that are bothering me, things that I need to address. And once they're addressed, I'm kind of done. So yeah. If you haven't checked out my 2-minute tips series, I believe it was tip number 3, where I talked about how my process for going about how do I know when I'm finished with a mix. Check out that video. I'll try to remember to link it. Link. There. Now, if I forget, you can hound me in the comments until I put it in here. There should be a link below to that video. But I talked about my process of how to know when I'm done, kind of the last stage of the mixing process, which is a bit of a mystery for people. So check that out. You'll see me do that live here in these videos probably pretty soon, because I'm probably going to run out of stuff that needs to be done. So, but today, as I listened, particularly as I listened to verse 2, and then when the guitars come back in. So verse 2 drops out to just one guitar, and it's mostly bass driven. And I noticed that it felt like the guitars aren't as clear as I'd like them to be. I don't want them to be bright and harsh. That's a big thing that people do, especially kind of in the home studio world. We tend to just crank up the highs and the gain on our amps or our amp models, and then the guitars just come through and you just have so much high frequencies it chops your head off. I don't want that. But I do want clarity. I want warmth. I want big thickness, but I also want clarity. I'm not one to mix super bright in general, but I do want the guitars to be heard. And as of right now, so just for example, we get over here to this kind of the pre-chorus. If we listen to just the guitars here,
Always looking over my shoulder, always.
in the mix, you're really just hearing that one guitar on the right doing the big diamond chords, the jung, 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 jung. They're there, and you know they're there, and if they went away, you'd miss them, but you're not able to really pick them out as well.
Always looking over my shoulder, always looking.
So I want those to be a little clearer, okay? So we've done a little bit of that clarity work earlier. You may remember when we EQ'd our electric guitar bus. It was just pretty thick and muddy over all the guitars here, but now I think we need to do some individual work on the individual guitars, because I don't think we need to do more on the bus, because for example, this telly part, it's got all the gain, all the brightness that I want. If I start to take out more low mids with the bus EQ, it's going to affect that guitar as well. But these two guitars are where I want to hone my attention. So let's start with the first one. This is the main guitar that plays at the very beginning of the song, the main riff. Let's just take a listen to that. So here's the EQ on that. We've done a little bit of work already. We notched out kind of a frequency and just kind of almost like a shelf EQ, just getting it from being too thick. Now, I think we could use a little bit of brightness. I love to do some cuts to get rid of things I don't need before I boost things that I do. That's just kind of how I've always done it, and it seems to work well for me. So something to try if you've never tried that. But I want to try to get a little more brightness out of this guitar. But let's find a better spot to listen. Let's go back to that verse 2 I was talking about, because that has just this guitar and drums, and I'd rather do some of this in context. So I'm going to mute the vocal for a little bit and the organ, and just have drums, bass, and guitar. Okay, the other guitar comes in there to play the riff, which is nice. I'll mute those guitars as well. I really just want to hear these two. So let me get a spot. Just do this one spot here. As annoying as that spot is, I want to listen to that. Because basically, I would love for, the way I like to approach mixing, especially rock stuff, is I would love it if this guitar was the only guitar in the session. I would want it plus drums and bass to sound amazing. If there was no organ, if there was nothing else but drums, bass, one electric, and vocals, like a trio, I would want this to sound as good as possible so that then I can bring in these other guitars and they sound good too. I was doing a mix last week where kind of the shining point of this, it was a full band mix with acoustic and electric guitar and some keys and then drums and bass. And the shining light of that, the best sounding track, I thought was the one acoustic guitar track. So I built the mix kind of around that and the vocals. Instead of building it around the electric guitars and the drums, which is kind of my default for rockier stuff. And so that informed a lot of my decisions on the drums and the bass and the guitars and the vocals, because that acoustic was kind of the starting point, really the acoustic vocal together. So this is kind of that in that same vein. I want to make, if all I had was this guitar, I want it to work really well, and then I want to fit the other guitars around it if I can. So that means listening to this, or maybe even listening at a chorus. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to change my mind. I'm allowed to change my mind. Yeah. So I'm going to loop that section. And just listen to that. We're just listening to that one guitar, drums and bass, and I'm going to mess with the EQ a little bit on that guitar, see if we can get it to feel a little better. I don't default to adding more compression onto heavy guitars, distorted guitars, because distortion is kind of like compression anyway. So compression doesn't do a lot for me there. But it's an option. It's a possibility. A lot of times when I listen to, I think recently I was listening to a Switchfoot record, one of the older ones, but it just felt like, even when I've seen them live, if he just strums one chord on his guitar, they've got a ton of compression on that. I don't know if it's a compressor pedal or compression at the board, but every note seems to be just tight and squished. So maybe I'll try that now. I'm wanting to try that now that I've said that. But first, I want to get the tone a little bit better. It's not quite bright enough. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. This is maybe my third cup of coffee this morning, and it's like 10:30. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking and mix. See, up here, that brings in some clarity, right? It does. But it almost has that, somebody described once, I forget who it was. Oh, who was it? He's a mastering guy. He's friends with Ian Shepherd. I can't remember. Anyway, on Twitter, he described the latest, this was several years ago, the latest Foo Fighters record, I think it was Wasting Light, as he said it sounded like bumblebees in a tin can. And so I didn't agree, but this is what that sounds like to me. So very buzzy. It's not really what I want. But I do want some more clarity. So maybe it's more down here, or maybe there's another way to get it, but this is kind of the thoughts going through my head right now. So I didn't like anything there. All of it, when I went up really high, it was still that same sort of buzziness. And then boosting the mids just didn't. It just made it more muddy. I did do a little cut in the upper mids that was ringing, but it's easy to find those frequencies and to start cutting them by default. I've probably, if you tend to do that, it's probably my fault. I've done too much of it. But it just didn't, none of that really struck me as necessary, and it felt a little fake. So I'm going to try something that I don't do a lot, which is to actually throw a compressor on this one guitar and kind of see what happens. So compression, especially on something like this where I'm going between playing single notes and strumming like power chords, obviously the distortion is compressing quite a bit, but the compression might, I don't know if it will, but it might allow me to tighten things up and bring out a little more of the upper mids in a way that doesn't feel like an EQ boost, but feels like a clarity boost. Does that make sense? Probably not. Let's try it. And I lost my plugins. There we go. Okay. Here's what I'm thinking. By the way, I love this. But if you're watching this, thank you. Leave a comment, say, I'm watching this. Thank you. Just so I can say thank you. But obviously, if no one watched these videos, I couldn't make them. So thank you for watching. I hope this is helpful for you. I love this because there is no science. I mentioned this in an email last week. There's no formula to this stuff. I can give you starting points. I can give you ideas. But every single guitar is different. And that, to me, is what makes it exciting. That's what means I can mix a song every day for a year if I want to, and everyone's going to be potentially exciting because there's something new to create, something new to fix, something new to change, something new to alter. Anyway, I'm getting romantic, but I'm a romanticist. Romanticist? Romantic? You want to know what's not cool is when you're feeling all creative and you say something in a YouTube video and then you look over and your dog's going to the bathroom in the yard. That just totally killed the mojo. Okay. So here's what I'm hearing. When I turn it on and off, I'm hearing essentially what I described before I started, which is kind of cool, that the settings here, slower attack, really fast release. The idea is the guitar is going jung, 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 jung. So I'd like the compressor to let go between each of those hits. If it's never really letting go, then it's not really compressing, and it's not letting go so that the attacks can then come through, essentially. I know it's probably more complicated and I'm oversimplifying, but with this, I want the front end of the note to come through, and the back end of the note, once the compressor drops, the signal drops below the threshold, I want it to let go so it can come back through again. So I heard more of a tightening up happen when I brought the release down. And then the attack, I don't hear a lot of difference here, but seems like up in the 50s range, I still get some snap coming through. But overall, tone-wise, what I hear is a little bit more clarity in that upper mid-range. It's squashing things down. The low mids are getting a little more contained, and then the upper mids it's almost like they're saying, be free, like come out a little bit. And it's got a little bit of that buzziness that we heard before, but it's more contained. it doesn't sound like an EQ boost. It sounds like something different. It sounds like compression. Let's listen to that one more time. Okay, Studio One is annoying in that when you click the on and off here, it mutes, it clicks the audio. So I'm gonna click this, which is the actual bypass button. So when that is yellow, that's when it's bypassed, just so you know. So we'll start bypass and we'll turn it on. So that time around, I don't hear it as much. Let's hear it on the next section, the big chorus. So what I said earlier about having the initial attack snap through, if you've watched my videos, you know I'm kind of a big fan of slower attack times so the compressor doesn't squash too much and get rid of the dynamics, especially on things like drums. It really kind of doesn't matter here. Letting it come through up to even 100 millisecond attack, the guitar already has lost its attack. It doesn't sound like a dry guitar into a DI, right? It already, the distortion and drive and everything has already done some of that. There's actually a tightness that comes from bringing the attack slower, it sounds like, in this instance. So we're gonna go faster attack on both, and then mess with the threshold so that it's still hanging out at the peaks. It's not just constantly compressing, and the ratio is pretty high because we want it to compress pretty heavily when it compresses at the top of that range. So let's just play with that a little more. Okay, it's not super cut and dry. I'm gonna switch the compressor to in front of the EQ because I might want to EQ it a little bit more, and the EQ will affect how the compressor is working. So let's do that switch and see how we like the sound. I don't know if you caught what I just did. This is cool. See, I would never think, let's do a video about this, but this is gonna be really interesting. Okay, this if you don't have this, if you don't use Studio One, don't have this compressor, I'm sorry. Or if you don't have this feature, I'm sorry. But Studio One, this is a normal compressor. You've probably seen a million of them. But it has this side chain section here. And this allows me to have an internal side chain filter, which means the compressor listens to something other than the actual signal. So if we listen to this filter, we can essentially, we can turn it on here, and then I can listen to what's coming through. So this is the signal coming through that the compressor is listening to. And then I can do things like roll off the lows. Because what's something, okay, class, what is something we know about low frequencies versus high frequencies? Low frequencies tend to have more energy. So when you send an entire mix through a compressor with a lot of low end, the low end triggers that compressor, which causes the pumping that we get. So that's why we try to control the low end. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, which is why multiband compression can be cool. This is essentially a form of multiband compression, but it's not. So it's telling the compressor, don't listen to everything below 300 hertz, okay? Make it 300 to make it just easy. And then it says, so don't listen to that, and then compress the full signal based on what you hear above 300. So the compressor is listening to this while it compresses this. And that is going to cause it to react differently. It's going to listen to just those upper mids we were talking about. The low end is cloudying things up, which is why we couldn't really get anywhere with EQ to get more clarity, and then even compression was kind of just giving us more of the same. I'll be honest, rewind the video 5-7 minutes and you'll be like, Joe, it doesn't sound much different or better. I say, I agree, that's why I tried this. So now we can change how the compressor's working. The threshold and the ratio will need to change because we have less, it's a lot quieter signal coming through, but I think we'll be able to get something cool. So let me just tinker with these settings for a bit and see what we can do. So again, we're listening to the compressed signal, but the compressor is listening to everything without 300 hertz and below. Okay, so I have some thoughts. I'll give you those in a second. Let's go back to the intro, which is where the guitar, this one guitar comes in, and it's just this guitar by itself with the drums. Let's listen to that. Okay, I think now that we've compressed on the front end, the low end could use a little more work. Let me do that with some EQ. Okay, so you may have heard me. I just went, ooh, that was an involuntary. So interesting how the intro, I made it a little clearer. And you may think, Joe, that's a dumb EQ curve with this notch on top of a wide cut, but it just sounded right. And I'm not going to go back and change the notch because that looks like a weird butt crack. But anyway, don't EQ out your butt cracks unless that you need to. But when it got to the jing, 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 it really felt like the compression is doing its job. So the intro part, the single note riff stuff, when I've got everything on, you can hear the compressor working. I bend up that D. It's something that it gets a little lost without the compressor. Not really lost, but it's a little more clear with the compressor on. You hear how that note kind of swells in? That's the compressor kind of doing that. And so on the intro sounds a little bit better. It's a little bit clearer, not as muddy, but it still sounds like a rock guitar. It's not weak and thin and sterile. But when it comes into the chugga chugga part, it's just got this thickness and this beefiness, but it's still got some clarity on the top end. We can hear the buzzing without it sounding weird. Here it is without, let me turn all the plugins off, without those plugins, and then with. Now you may say, well, Joe, that's just louder. That's why it sounds better. Yes, you can see it is louder there, but that's kind of what the compressor is supposed to do. When the guitar is laying in big on the choruses, you can see the level between the before and after, the input and the output are about the same. So the choruses get kind of tamed down, which is okay because we've got vocals screaming out, we've got a bunch of guitars playing, but on this first verse, it's just this one guitar. So the fact that the chugga chugga stuff is a little bit louder, then when I dig in, it gets quieter. That's exactly what we want, and it gives it this clarity and this punch that's really cool. So again, without, you may just listen to the raw track and say, okay, that's fine, but then add in the drums and the bass. Suddenly there's kind of this whoa, 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 whoa down there that it's making things unclear. But then click on the compressor and EQ. I'll be honest, I haven't listened to the original mix of this song, but I think I like this guitar tone better. So hey, remix, release. I'm kidding, I'm not gonna do that. But this is kind of cool, and I like the tone that we were able to get. So thank you for watching. This video went down the rabbit trail, 30 minutes of messing around with guitar, but I'm really glad we did because I think I'll probably do something similar to the other guitar, maybe, or maybe nothing, and see how the other guitars blend in now that we've got this guitar locked down with a much better tone than we had at the start of this video. Thanks for watching. I'll put a link to the next episode below once it's live, or you can just head over to this page and get the tracks here, and then the playlist is here so you can see all the lovely videos and see what the current one is, and you can see that handsome face. All right, I'm done. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. See you in the next one.